The courthouse air was heavy that morning, as if even the marble walls felt the weight of what was to come. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, illuminating motes of dust that drifted above the rows of empty benches. In the hallway beyond, the courtroom doors, a steady hum of whispered conversations rose and fell, law clerks trading rumors about the day's docket, bailiffs straightening their uniforms, and spectators exchanging nervous glances as they clutched worn leather briefcases or paper cups of coffee. Every so often, polished shoes clicked against the terrazzo floor, an urgent metronome counting down to the moment the gavel would fall. Amira Davis stood just outside the courtroom, her back pressed against the wood-paneled wall. Her heart hammered like a drum, each beat echoing truths she wasn't ready to voice. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her jacket, smudging tears she barely remembered shedding. The complaint she clutched, a crumpled packet of charges and affidavits, felt too heavy in her trembling hands. She drew in a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. Today was the day she had to speak her own name, recite her own story, and demand the justice that had been denied for far too long. Through the courtroom door, she saw Judge Hargrave take his seat, his black robe falling like a cloak of authority. Behind him, he glanced at the empty counsel tables, then down at his notes, eyebrows arching with practiced impatience. The clerk tapped a pen, waiting for the judge's nod. The hush deepened, thick as velvet. A murmur rippled through the few spectators gathered in the gallery. Neighbors, activists, a handful of press. They settled into the wooden benches, folding their hands in their laps, as if bracing for impact. Amira swallowed, her throat tight. She forced her legs forward, each step a battle against doubt. In her mind, she reviewed the words she would say, carefully chosen phrases that named her pain and her hope. At the counsel table, her attorney offered a quiet smile and a reassuring nod, sliding a glass of water toward her. Amira took it, feeling the cool relief of something solid in her palm. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise!" Amira rose, heart in her throat, as Judge Hargrave raised his gavel. The courtroom stood still, waiting for the sound that would signal the beginning of her reckoning. Silence stretched so tight it threatened to snap. Then the gavel fell and everything changed. The echo of the gavel's strike lingered like a held breath as Amira sank into the chair beside her attorney. Her fingers curled tightly around the glass of water, knuckles whitening. From her vantage at the counsel table, she could see the bench looming above her, its polished surface reflecting the stern face of Judge Hargrave. His eyes flicked down at her file, then upward, as though gauging whether the day's first witness would tremble or stand firm. Amira pressed her palms to her temples, closing her eyes for a moment to steady the storm inside her chest. She could hear the faint scratch of the stenographer's pen, the soft shuffling of papers as the prosecutor organized his exhibits. Her name, Amira Davis, still felt foreign on her tongue, a word she had avoided speaking aloud until now. A single sob broke free before she could stop it. The room seemed to pause, as if noticing her grief for the first time. A bead of moisture trickled down her cheek, and she brushed it away hastily, embarrassed by the vulnerability laid bare in public view. Her attorney leaned forward, offering a gentle whisper, "Take your time." Across the aisle, the prosecutor, a tall man in a charcoal suit, cleared his throat and glanced at her with thinly veiled impatience. He tapped his pen against the desk, eager to begin. Amira straightened her spine and inhaled, imagining that each breath pulled strength from deep beneath her ribs. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was cool and measured. "Miss Davis, are you prepared to proceed?" Amira's throat tightened. The world around her seemed to recede, her attorney's encouraging nod, the slate-grey walls, the spectators' fixed stares, until all she felt was the judge's gaze, expectant and unyielding. I am, Your Honor," she managed, her voice trembling. The words came out in a rush, like water bursting through a dam. She closed her eyes again, willing herself to regroup. The judge inclined his head, and the prosecutor rose, crossing, and to the evidence table with purposeful strides. Amira watched as he laid out a series of photographs and documents, images of bruises, torn clothing, police reports. Each exhibit hit her chest like a hammer blow. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She could feel her vision blur, but she refused to let the tears spill again. Not now. Not here. "Ms. Davis," the prosecutor said, turning to her with a crisp tone, "can you explain where these injuries came from?" Amira inhaled, the glass of water cool against her lips. She set it down and straightened her shoulders. "They're from the night my daughter and I were attacked," she said, voice soft but clear. She paused, gathering the courage to recall that dark evening. A hush rippled through the courtroom. Amira saw a few faces shift, some sympathetic, others skeptical, but she focused only on the truth she carried in her heart. She would speak it, even if her voice cracked. Tears welled again, but this time she let them fall. Each drop felt like a release, a surrender of shame that had weighed on her since the attack. She described the fear in her daughter's eyes, the searing pain of the first blow, the bitter irony of pleading for help from those sworn to protect. Her words cracked and wavered, but she pressed on, drawing on reserve she hadn't known. She possessed. As she spoke, the judge leaned forward, the stern lines of his face softening just a fraction. The clerk paused in her transcription, attentive. Even the prosecutor's pen stilled as if struck by her courage. When Amira finished, the courtroom remained silent for a heartbeat. Then the judge cleared his throat, lowering his gaze from her trembling form to the rows of faces before him. In that pregnant moment, Amira realized her tears had done more than reveal her pain. They had commanded the room's attention, demanded that her story be heard. And in the hush that followed, she felt the first glimmer of justice stirring. In the air, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Amira Davis finished her testimony. Judge Hargrave tapped his gavel against the bench, the sharp knock echoing through the high-ceilinged room. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the collected, faces lingering on Amira's tear-streaked cheeks. He folded his arms beneath the folds of his robe and leaned back, adopting the air of a man who had placed judgment above empathy. "Ms. Davis," he began, voice cool and measured, "while I acknowledge the distressing nature of your recollection, we must consider whether your account aligns with the evidence before us." He lowered his voice, adding a thinly veiled edge of amusement. "After all, the human memory can be fallible, especially when emotions run high." A ripple of murmurs spread through the gallery. Amira's attorney bristled, standing to counter, but Judge Hargrave raised a hand to silence him. "Counselor, I assure you I am not finished." He shifted his gaze back to Amira, tilting his head with a mocking courtesy. "Tell me, Ms. Davis, do you honestly believe you can recall every detail of that night with perfect clarity?" Amira swallowed, her throat raw. She drew in a steadying breath, remembering her daughter's frightened whisper. "Mommy, please." Those words sharpened her resolve. "Your Honor, I remember exactly what happened. I remember his face, the way he laughed." The judge's lips twitched as if stifling a smile. "Ah, the laughter," he repeated, mocking the word. "Do you expect this court to accept that your trauma includes an auditory hallucination of malicious mirth? Perhaps you misheard, Ms. Davis." A hush fell over the courtroom. Amira's heart pounded, her cheeks flushing with indignation. Across the aisle, the prosecutor leaned forward, eyes gleaming in anticipation of the judge's skepticism. Amira's attorney shot the prosecutor a warning glance but said nothing. Judge Hargrave tapped his pen against the bench again. "I find it curious that certain aspects of your testimony rely on subjective interpretation. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, rising, but even the photographs and medical reports provide no concrete proof of the assailant's identity or behavior beyond the physical injuries. He spread his hands helplessly, staring at Amira, as if her emotion had already undermined her credibility. The judge nodded slowly. Precisely. Unless more definitive evidence emerges, Ms. Davis's account remains just that, an account. The court must be wary of letting sympathy cloud judgment. He paused, letting the judgmental silence drape over Amira like a heavy cloak. Her attorney stood then, voice low but firm. Your Honor, the absence of perfect clarity does not negate the truth. Ms. Davis's testimony is corroborated by her daughter's statement and the timing of the incident as recorded by responding officers. Judge Hargrave raised an eyebrow, yet the daughter was asleep and awoke in distress. Emotional outbursts upon waking can lead to confusion. And the officer's report, while noting injuries, makes no mention of an assailant's words or demeanor. Are we to assume he simply forgot to document the laughter? His gaze flicked over the spectators, as if challenging them to defend Amira's account. Amira's chest tightened, tears prickling anew. She swallowed hard, determined not to let the judge's mockery unravel her. She thought of the steadiness in her daughter's small hand that night, the roughness of the attacker's breath, the cold steel of his mocking grin. She could almost see him now, leaning close as he jeered. Judge Hargrave's voice cut through her reverie. Unless the defense has further evidence to present, I will consider whether these proceedings should continue. He glanced at his notes, then back to Amira. Counselor, do you intend to call another witness? Her attorney hesitated, searching her eyes. Amira shook her head slightly. She would stand on what she had said and what she remembered. She would not allow her pain to be dismissed. A tense moment passed. Judge Hargrave sighed, as if granting her a concession. Very well. We will proceed, but let this court be clear. Emotional conviction does not equal factual accuracy. He brought down his gavel and spoke the words that felt like ice in her veins. Court is adjourned until 2 o'clock. The gavel struck once more. Amira rose with the others, her body trembling. As the courtroom emptied, she met her attorney's eyes, both of them bruised, but neither broken. Outside, the hallway buzzed with whispered judgments. But inside, Amira carried her truth like a shield, knowing that mockery could not erase her memory or her voice. The corridors of the courthouse buzzed with hushed conversations as Amira Davis and her attorney stepped into the gallery outside Judge Hargrave's courtroom. Lawyers in tailored suits brushed past them, murmuring about the unexpected turn of the morning session. Paralegals paused by the oak benches to exchange theories on the judge's remarks. Even the bailiffs, usually stone-faced, leaned against marble pillars and whispered among themselves. Amira's attorney, Denise Ferraro, closed her briefcase with a soft click and placed a reassuring hand on Amira's arm. Ignore the noise, she advised quietly. We know what we saw and heard. That judge's mockery only shows how threatened he is by your truth. Amira nodded, though each echoing footstep down the corridor felt amplified by 1,000 questioning eyes. Along one wall, the press table stood nearly deserted, save for a lone reporter tapping notes into a tablet. The reporter glanced up, his brow furrowed in curiosity. He cleared his throat and stood, walking toward them with practiced ease. Ms. Davis, can you comment on Judge Hargrave's suggestion that your memory of laughter might be mistaken? He asked, voice soft enough not to reach the courtroom, but loud enough to make Amira's pulse quicken. Denise stepped forward. We'll address all questions at the appropriate time, she said firmly. The reporter nodded, stepping back and resuming his seat. The press table fell silent once more. As they continued down the corridor, a cluster of spectators emerged from the courtroom, neighbors, activists, and a few distant relatives of other plaintiffs. They formed a small ring, heads bent together in a tight knot of whispers. One woman, her cheeks flushed with indignation, spotted Amira and reached out, grabbing her elbow. "Ignore that judge," she hissed, voice fierce. "He has no idea what real pain looks like." Another woman, younger and dressed in jeans and a denim jacket, nodded vigorously. "Your testimony was brave. Don't let anyone tell you you're mistaken. Courts are full of men like him who can't fathom what it's like to be a mother under attack." Amira offered a grateful smile, but excused herself gently, pulling Denise along. At the end of the hall, a row of chairs stood against a paneled wall, and the two women sat down. Through the narrow window of the courtroom door, they could see Judge Hargrave presiding over a different case. This one, a routine traffic violation that drew only half the attention of his morose staff. Denise leaned in, lowering her voice. "We need to prepare for cross-examination in the afternoon session. The prosecutor will try to emphasize any inconsistency in your recollection. We need fresh witnesses, perhaps your daughter's neighbor who called 911, or even the officer's superior who reviews reports." Amira brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, considering. "I want my daughter's voice to be heard," she said quietly. "If she can testify, it will show that she remembers his laughter too." Her attorney's face brightened. "Yes, her account could tip the balance. Let's arrange that." They rose together, and Denise led Amira toward the clerk's office to file motions. The clerk's assistant, a stern woman behind a glass partition, greeted them with a polite nod. "How may I help you?" she asked. Denise slid a motion across the counter. As they completed the paperwork, Amira felt a ripple of resolve settle in her shoulders. Exiting the clerk's office, they passed a group of defense attorneys huddled near the water cooler, whispering and shaking their heads in low amusement. One of them smirked as Denise walked by, but Amira met his gaze unflinchingly. He glanced away. In the distance, the gallery doors opened and patrons began filing back into the courtroom. The afternoon session was about to begin. Denise offered Amira a gentle smile. "Ready?" she said. Amira nodded. She would return to that bench, despite the judge's doubt and the gallery's whispers. With each step toward the courtroom door, her heart steadied, reminded that every whisper, every ridicule, only underscored the power of her testimony. She would speak again, and this time the gallery would have to listen. The courtroom lights brightened as Amira Davis settled back into her seat. The bench loomed above, its polished mahogany surface catching the glow like a watchful eye. Denise Ferraro sat beside her, whispering a final reassurance, and Amira nodded, focusing her mind on the task ahead. As the gallery filled, she noticed a man she had not seen before. He occupied a seat near the front row, just behind the press table. He wore a dark jacket, and his posture was upright, almost rigid, as if he anticipated every turn in the proceedings. His gaze was unwavering, fixed on Amira with an intensity that made her skin prickle. When the bailiff announced the court was back in session, Judge Hargrave pounded his gavel. The prosecutor rose to continue his cross-examination. Amira braced herself, but her eyes kept drifting toward the stranger. He was clean-shaven, with cropped hair threaded through with silver. His features were stern, but not unkind, a strong jaw, high cheekbones and eyes the color of storm clouds. He held a small notebook in his hand, pen poised over its pages. Every so often, his lips would move as if he spoke soft words to himself, and his pen would jot something down. The prosecutor's questions cut through the hush of the courtroom. He probed at Amira's recollections, questioning minor inconsistencies in her timeline. He asked about the precise angle of the street lamp, the duration between phone calls, and the distance between her home and the neighbor's house. Each question felt like a gauntlet thrown at her feet. Amira answered as best she could, relying on the vividness of her memory. Yet under the judge's skeptical gaze and the prosecutor's relentless scrutiny, doubt crept in. Then the stranger leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. He snapped the notebook closed. For a moment, Amira thought he might rise, stand up, and intervene. Instead, he folded his hands and leaned back, his expression thoughtful. The sight of him made the prosecutor falter mid-sentence, shifting his weight as though unsettled by the stranger's silent presence. Amira drew a deep breath. She realized that the courtroom atmosphere had shifted ever so slightly. Tension turned undercurrents into tidal pools. When the cross-examination ended, Denise rose to call the first witness for the defense, Detective Marcus Liu, the officer who had responded to the 911 call. Amira watched as Liu took the stand and swore the oath. From her peripheral vision, she caught the stranger standing, adjusting his jacket before slipping quietly out of the gallery. His departure left an empty space in the front row that felt conspicuous, as though his absence spoke louder than his presence had. He snapped the notebook closed. For a moment, Amira thought he might rise, stand up, and intervene. Instead, he folded his hands and leaned back, his expression thoughtful. The sight of him made the prosecutor falter mid-sentence, shifting his weight as though unsettled by the stranger's silent presence. Amira drew a deep breath. She realized that the courtroom atmosphere had shifted ever so slightly. Tension turned undercurrents into tidal pools. When the cross-examination ended, Denise rose to call the first witness for the defense. Detective Marcus Liu, the officer who had responded to the 911 call. Amira watched as Liu took the stand and swore the oath. From her peripheral vision, she caught the stranger standing, adjusting his jacket before slipping quietly out of the gallery. His departure left an empty space in the front row that felt conspicuous, as though his absence spoke louder than his presence had. Detective Liu's testimony was precise and measured. He confirmed that he had noted the victim's injuries, the torn fabric of her coat, and the hysterical tone of her daughter's voice. He admitted he had not recorded the attacker's laughter. In his initial report, explaining that officers often focus first on securing the scene and tending to injuries, he expressed regret for any omission, acknowledging that a later supplement could be filed if necessary. Denise nodded, satisfied, and Amira exhaled, relief washing through her. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, gilding the courtroom in a warm light that felt hopeful. Amira's eyes drifted back to the empty seat where the stranger had sat. She wondered who he was, a curious observer, an advocate, or someone with a personal stake in her case. She felt a shiver, not of fear, but of possibility. Perhaps someone believed her so deeply that they had come to bear witness. As the day edged toward its close and more witnesses were called, Amira found herself buoyed by his silent support. Even though she did not know his name or purpose, the knowledge that an impartial stranger had been watching, taking notes, gave her courage. She realized that in a courtroom of doubt and mockery, sometimes the most profound affirmation came from those who watched without prejudice. When the court finally adjourned for the day, Amira gathered her belongings. She paused at the doorway, glancing into the front row once more. The stranger had not returned. The seat remained empty, a quiet reminder of his fleeting vigil. Amira touched the edge of her coat pocket, where her daughter's drawing of a laughing sun nestled safely. She pressed it gently, offering thanks to whoever had shown her that day that she was not alone. Then she stepped into the hallway, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. The courtroom was quiet when Amira Davis entered for the morning session. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. She paused at the threshold, her gaze drifting to the front row. There sat the stranger from the previous afternoon, his posture composed yet alert. His presence felt deliberate, as if he had been waiting just for her. She took her seat beside Denise Ferraro, who offered a reassuring nod. Across the aisle, the prosecutor arranged his papers, and lawyers settled into their chairs. Judge Hargrave took his place behind the bench, his expression unreadable. The clerk called the docket, and soon Amira's case was next. Denise rose to call the defense's next witness, Father Thomas Caldwell, a local pastor who had counseled Amira and her daughter in the weeks following the attack. As Father Caldwell approached the stand, Amira's nerves tightened, but she drew strength from the supportive faces in the gallery. She noted the stranger leaning forward, hands clasped, his stormy eyes fixed on the witness. On the stand, Father Caldwell spoke with calm conviction. He described Amira's ordeal, the nightmares that beset her daughter, and the gradual journey toward healing. His voice grew solemn as he recounted the evening they prayed together, seeking solace after the trauma. When he mentioned Amira's recounting of the attacker's mocking laughter, Amira's heart fluttered. She glanced at the stranger. His face held no skepticism, only empathy. In that moment, she felt seen in a way the courtroom had not yet allowed. The prosecutor rose for cross-examination, his tone condescending as he questioned the pastor's qualifications to interpret emotional distress. Father Caldwell responded with gentle firmness, affirming that emotional testimony from a spiritual counselor was as valid as any expert opinion. Judge Hargrave listened, fingers steepled beneath his chin, but he did not interrupt. When the pastor stepped down, Denise called Detective Liu back to the stand for supplemental testimony. The detective affirmed that his additional report documented the laughter, based on Amira's account and a later interview with her daughter. He produced the supplemental form, and Denise entered it into evidence. The courtroom buzzed softly as the document was marked. Amira exhaled slowly. The laughter was no longer an unrecorded detail. It was fact. She felt the weight of Judge Hargrave's earlier mockery lift from her shoulders, replaced by a steady determination. She looked toward the stranger. His gaze met hers, and he gave a slight nod before returning his attention to the bench. During a brief recess, Amira stepped into the hallway. She saw Father Caldwell speaking with Denise near the gallery doors. The lone reporter approached her, pen and recorder in hand, but she shook her head. She wanted privacy to gather her thoughts before the final witnesses were called. Returning inside, she noticed the empty seat where the stranger had perched. Denise whispered, "He's gone again." Amira nodded, wondering about his identity, a concerned citizen, a journalist, or someone connected to her case. Whoever he was, his empathy had given her courage. The afternoon session began with Amira's daughter, Lily, taking the stand. The little girl's voice quivered at first, but she repeated her mother's account of the attacker's laughter, describing it as a mean giggle that echoed in the dark. A hush fell. Judge Hargrave watched the child with softened eyes. Even the prosecutor's expression shifted as he struggled to find a challenging question. When Lily's testimony concluded, Denise called for a final expert witness, a forensic psychologist who testified that auditory memories tied closely to emotional trauma were often the most reliable. The expert explained how laughter, especially mocking laughter, imprints on memory when it accompanies violence. He cited studies and case histories, and the judge leaned forward, absorbing each detail. Amira sat back, feeling a sense of triumph. She met the stranger's eyes one last time. He closed his notebook, slid it into his briefcase, and stood. Before leaving, he paused at the railing, offering Amira a small, respectful bow. Then he slipped out through the side door, leaving behind a courtroom transformed. As Judge Hargrave prepared to adjourn, he glanced down at his notes and then at Amira. The stern lines of his face had softened into reflection. For the first time, his gaze held something akin to respect. Amira realized that in his eyes, Her memory and her courage had finally been recognized. The doors of the courtroom closed. Behind Lily Davis, as she stepped off the witness stand, a hush settled over the room, the polished wood and high ceilings amplifying every footstep. Amira Davis stood beside her attorney, Denise Ferraro, feeling the smooth grain of the counsel, table beneath her palm. Beyond the oak double doors, life continued. Ambulance sirens, distant traffic, travelers hurrying to appointments. But here, time had slowed to a measured pulse. Judge Hargrave folded his hands on the bench, eyes fixed on the evidence files. Spread before him, the room bristled with anticipation. Spectators leaned forward, clutching programs and notepads. Reporters tapped notes into tablets, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens. The prosecutor straightened his posture, ready to deliver closing arguments. Amira's heart pounded so fiercely she thought the walls themselves might hear it. Denise stood, smoothing her jacket. "Your Honor," she began, voice clear, "we call no further witnesses. The defendant rests." She returned to her seat. The prosecutor rose, adjusting his tie. He paced slowly before the jury, weaving between their rows as he recounted the morning's events. His voice was steady, analytical, emphasizing procedural details and questioning the reliability of emotional testimony. But with each point he made, Amira sensed the gulf between sterile fact and lived experience yawning wider. When the prosecutor sat, Denise rose to present her closing. She spoke of pain and resilience, of a mother's courage to stand before a judge and strangers to protect her child. She detailed the corroborated testimony, the supplemental reports, and the expert analysis of memory. Every word she spoke was deliberate, weaving threads of evidence into a tapestry that left no space for doubt. Amira watched Judge Hargrave's face soften as Denise recounted Lily's description of the attacker's mocking laughter. His eyes drifted to the empty front row seat where the stranger had once sat, attended by nothing but memory. Denise concluded, voice steady, "Justice demands that we acknowledge truth, even when it challenges our presumptions." She sat. A silence so complete it pressed against Amira's eardrums descended. Judge Hargrave rose, clearing his throat. He folded his robe with a practiced motion, then regarded Amira directly. His balanced tone carried a gravity that made every syllable resonate. "In this courtroom," he began, "we seek to reconcile the facts with the principles of fairness and empathy. Today, Ms. Davis, you have shown extraordinary bravery in sharing your experience. The court acknowledges the validity of your testimony and the corroborating evidence presented." He paused, allowing the words to settle. Amira's vision blurred. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet the judge's steady gaze. In that moment, the courtroom door ceased to be a threshold between public and private spaces. It symbolized the boundary Amira had crossed. From silent suffering to vocal assertion of her truth, the judge continued, his tone unwavering. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Let this ruling affirm not only the legal recognition of injury, but also the moral imperative to listen, believe, and protect those who come here seeking justice." He pounded the gavel, its sharp echo releasing a held breath. Amira rose, legs trembling as the gavel's vibrations faded. A murmur swelled through the gallery, some cheers, some tearful sobs, and a reverent hush as spectators processed the verdict. Denise offered her a hand, and Amira grasped it, tears brimming but unashamed. As the jurors filed out and the bailiffs opened the double doors, Amira lingered at the counsel table. She glanced toward the entrance, where the suit-clad prosecutor and his team relayed news through hushed tones. Beyond the door's polished surface, the world awaited, the hum of life that had gone on while she faced judgment. She straightened her shoulders and moved toward the door. With each step, she felt the weight of doubt peel away, replaced by the steadiness born of truth recognized. The door swung open, sunlight flooding the threshold. Amira paused in that bright arc of illumination, breathing in its warmth. Outside, Denise fell into step beside her. Amira looked up at the courthouse facade, the stone pillars, the carved pediment, and felt a surge of something profound. Belonging. The courtroom door had closed behind her, but its opening had marked the beginning of her new chapter, one defined not by pain, endured in silence, but by strength proclaimed and justice secured. The morning after the verdict dawned with uncanny stillness. Pale light filtered through the curtains, painting Amira Davis's bedroom walls in muted shades of grey. She lay in bed a moment longer, listening to the rhythm of life beyond her windowsill, the hum of distant traffic, the soft sigh of the heating vents, her daughter Lily's gentle breathing from the adjoining room. Each sound felt magnified in the hush of dawn, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Amira slipped from beneath the covers and planted her feet on the cool hardwood floor. She paused, pressing her hand against the bedpost as memories of the courtroom flooded back. Lily's frightened gaze, the judge's stern rebuke, the gavel's echo marking the end of a long struggle. Now, in the fragile calm before all that lay ahead, Amira felt both relief and trepidation. In the kitchen, she set a kettle on the stove and watched its chrome surface catch the first light. While water warmed, she opened the refrigerator and drew out a mug, tracing faded stickers along its rim, Lily's handiwork from happier mornings. Steam began to rise in spirals as the kettle boiled. Amira closed her eyes and inhaled the comforting warmth, letting it settle in her chest like a protective cloak. At the table, Lily sat in her pajamas, clutching a bowl of cereal. Her dark hair fell in silky waves around her shoulders, her eyes wide and vulnerable. "Good morning," Amira said softly, pouring slow ribbons of milk over Lily's oats. The clink of spoon against bowl punctuated the quiet. Lily looked up and offered a tentative smile. "Mommy," she began, voice hushed, "are you okay?" Amira knelt beside her, smoothing her daughter's hair away from her forehead. "I am now," she said. "Last night was hard, but we did it together." Lily's small hand found hers, fingers curling around Amira's. That simple gesture steadied a tremor in Amira's voice. They ate in companionable silence, each bite a reclaimed rhythm. Outside, the wind stirred fallen leaves across the porch, carrying with it the scent of autumn. Amira watched the world awaken through the window pane, feeling the press of possibility and uncertainty mingling in the air. Her phone buzzed against the table. Denise Ferraro's name flashed, a reminder that preparations for the next hearing were already underway. Amira answered, listening to her attorney outline the tasks ahead, gathering new witness statements, filing motions, coordinating with community advocates. With each point, Amira felt the weight of responsibility shift back onto her shoulders. After hanging up, she gathered folders and notes, arranging them neatly in her satchel. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece, snapshots of laughter and holidays, of moments before tragedy had rewritten their story. Amira paused at a picture of her late mother, tracing the curve of her smile. She whispered a vow to carry truth forward, no matter how fierce the coming storm. Standing at the front door, Amira felt the hush thicken, as though time itself had paused. The courthouse doors would open again soon, unleashing a swirl of reporters, critics and well-wishers, all clamoring for reaction. She took a steadying breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped into the crisp air. The world exhaled around her, the rustle of newspapers, the hiss of bus brakes, the murmur of early commuters. She walked toward her car with measured steps, watching morning light fracture through dark clouds. Reporters and camera crews would soon gather, very hungry for reactions. She prepared to truly meet them with honesty and poise, address supporters. At the community center, hold her daughter close and transform this calm into resilience and hope. Amira Davis slipped into the crowded community center where supporters had gathered to mark the trial's halfway point. Folding chairs filled the room's center, leaving narrow aisles along the back wall. Volunteers stacked pamphlets and arranged coffee urns, while activists posted signs reading, "Believe survivors and justice for all." Amira's heart fluttered as she entered. She chose a seat near the back, below a high window that cast streams of late-morning light across the linoleum floor. Around her, familiar faces clustered, neighbors who'd attended court, local clergy who'd offered comfort, and advocates from the women's shelter where Amira and Lily had stayed after the attack. Each smile and nod buoyed her spirit. Yet, she lingered in the shadows, allowing others to take the spotlight before she rose. She watched as the organizers called the meeting to order, each speaker outlining upcoming fundraisers, legislative initiatives, and community outreach efforts. Their voices filled the room with determined energy. Amira's attorney, Denise Ferraro, took the podium first. She spoke passionately about the importance of holding the justice system accountable and heralded Amira's bravery in bringing her case forward. Denise's words were met with applause and scattered cheers. Amira felt pride blossom amid the warmth of solidarity. Next came Father Thomas Caldwell, who reflected on faith, healing, and communal responsibility. His gentle cadence stirred emotions, and someone began distributing tissues. A hush fell as he concluded with a prayer for strength and truth. Tears glistened on many cheeks. Then Denise called forward Lily's school counselor, Maria Santos, who described the attack's traumatic impact on children and the need for trauma-informed care in schools. Maria's testimony echoed themes from the courtroom, reinforcing Amira's conviction that her experience could spark broader change. Throughout the speakers, Amira remained seated. She listened as stories of resilience and solidarity intertwined with her own journey. She felt the swell of collective purpose rising around her. Still, she hesitated to stand, afraid that stepping into the light too soon might shatter the fragile calm she'd found in anonymity. As the final community leader concluded, Denise turned to Amira and gestured toward the podium. All eyes swung to her, anticipation rippling through the crowd. Amira rose slowly, each movement deliberate. She walked up the aisle, feeling the carpet's soft pattern beneath her feet, and approached the podium, her palms damp against its wooden surface. Murmurs fluttered like birds through the assembled gathering. She surveyed the faces that had become her lifeline, some tearful, some resolute, some offering quiet encouragement. Her throat tightened. The microphone stood waiting, its metal sheen reflecting her earnest expression. Amira inhaled deeply, recalling her daughter's breathless plea that night, the echo of mocking laughter, the sting of disbelief in the courtroom. She steadied her voice. "Thank you," she began, her words resonating in the silent room. "Thank you for believing me, for standing with me, for giving me the courage to keep speaking." A soft wave of applause rippled through the audience. Amira paused, letting their support wash over her. "Today," she continued, "we rise, not only from the back of this room, but from the margins of silence and shame. We rise as mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, united by the belief that every voice matters and every story deserves to be heard." Her eyes glistened but did not waver. She spoke of the courtroom's challenges, the judge's mockery, the prosecutor's skepticism, and the unwavering truth she carried in her heart. With each sentence, her confidence grew. The room leaned in, drawn by her honest conviction. When she spoke of Lily's courage on the witness stand, a collective sigh of admiration swept the crowd. As she concluded, "Let our rising be more than a moment. It must become a movement," the applause erupted, sustained and heartfelt. Amira's cheeks warmed as she stepped back from the podium. She met Denise's proud gaze, then descended the steps, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Returning to her seat at the back, she realized that rising did not mean abandoning her place among supporters, but embracing it. In the warmth of that room, with hearts beating in unison, Amira Davis understood that her strength was amplified by community, and that together they would carry the truth forward, no matter how stormy the path ahead. The morning sunlight streamed through the courtroom windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished floor. Amira Davis sat at the counsel table, her satchel beside her chair, and watched as the bailiff opened the heavy double doors. The gallery filled quickly, supporters in colorful scarves, reporters with cameras, and curious onlookers murmuring among themselves. Yet when Judge Hargrave took his seat and the gavel struck, a sudden stillness fell over the room, so profound it felt as if time itself had paused. Amira felt it first in her chest, a slow exhalation of held breath, the usual rustle of papers, the clicking of pens, and the low murmur of conversation all faded to silence. She glanced at Denise Ferraro, whose steady presence beside her now seemed almost ethereal in the hush. Across the aisle, the prosecutor adjusted his tie, but he did not speak. Even the stenographer, poised to begin, lowered her pen. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning, like a distant whisper. The judge surveyed the courtroom with refined detachment. His gaze swept the counsel tables, the jury box, and finally the gallery. When his eyes landed on Amira, they held a new, quiet intensity, as though he were absorbing every detail of the moment before him. He tapped his gavel once crisply, breaking the spell of silence, yet for a heartbeat after, the room remained motionless. Amira drew in a steadying breath. She felt her heartbeat echo through her temples. This was the suspense of high stakes. The moment before the critical testimony, the pause when every person in the room recognized that what was about to happen would change everything. She watched as the bailiff summoned the first witness, her neighbor Teresa Huang, who had called 911 the night of the attack. Teresa rose and crossed to the stand, her steps confident despite her trembling hands. As she took the oath, the silence pressed in like a living thing. Amira's throat tightened as she recalled Teresa's voice crackling with urgency over the phone. "Please hurry, someone's been hurt." Teresa's presence now felt charged with that same urgency. The prosecutor began his questioning, but his voice sounded distant, echoing in the chamber's hush. Teresa replied with clear testimony about the cries she heard the moment she saw Amira and Lily huddled on the porch, and the mocking laughter that cut through the night air. With each word Teresa spoke, the room seemed to awaken, but never fully lost that charged stillness, like the air before a summer storm breaks. As Teresa described calling for help and the fear that gripped her, Amira felt tears sting her eyes. She looked up at the bench. Judge Hargrave's jaw was set, his gaze unwavering. It was as if he were listening not just to words, but to the undercurrent of emotion behind them. He leaned forward slightly, his robe's folds shifting with the motion. When Teresa finished and stepped down, the hush lingered. The prosecutor sat, exchanging a look with Denise that carried unspoken respect for the impact of Teresa's testimony. Denise rose without haste, calling Teresa's husband, Miguel, to the stand. His account mirrored his wife's. The pounding heart that drove him to rush outside, the sight of Lily shivering in his arms, and the echo of the assailant's laughter as he fled. As Miguel spoke, the judge closed his eyes for a moment, as if to feel the weight of Miguel's recollection. The courtroom remained motionless, a boat on glassy water, waiting for the wake. When Miguel stepped down, Denise turned to address the jury. Her voice broke through the stillness, warm and firm, weaving the two testimonies into a narrative that bridged evidence and empathy. The sudden stillness had not been an absence of life, but its intensification. Every person in that room had held their breath in solidarity with Amira's truth. And as Denise concluded her argument, the silence lifted like a curtain, replaced by the first tentative stirrings of movement. A juror shifting in her seat, a reporter tapping her pen, and finally the judge's gavel coming down to signal the end of testimony for the day. Amira exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving behind clarity and resolve. In that sudden stillness, she understood the power of being truly heard, and of the profound change that silence, when broken, could bring. Judge Hargrave sat behind the bench, his robe hanging heavily as though it bore the burdens of every decision he had ever made. Morning light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating the slight furrow in his brow. Across the courtroom, Amira Davis watched him, searching for a flicker of empathy amid the stern lines of his face. Today's session was devoted to legal arguments and motions, but beneath the procedural veneer lay something more fragile: the judge's uncertainty about where truth and law intersected. Denise Ferraro rose first, crossing to the well of the court with a stack of documents in her hand. Her voice was calm and authoritative as she laid out a motion for full consideration of the supplemental reports and witness testimonies regarding the mocking laughter. She spoke of the psychological impact such details carry, citing precedents in which courts have admitted emotional testimony as evidence of intent and character. Amira felt her pulse quicken. This motion could be pivotal. If Judge Hargrave granted it, the laughter would be acknowledged in the official record. The prosecutor responded with a measured tone, arguing that the supplemental report on the laughter was hearsay and lacked the immediacy required for admission under evidentiary rules. He emphasized the need for clear, present-tense observations and suggested that allowing retrospective emotional details would open the door to unreliable testimony. His words were precise, but Amira detected a thread of uncertainty in his delivery, a hesitation born from recognizing the power of what had been shared. As Denise concluded, she returned to her seat. The courtroom held its breath, awaiting the judge's ruling. Judge Hargrave leaned forward, fingers steepled in thought. He glanced at the supplemental report once more, his eyes tracing the typed words describing Detective Liu's addendum. He looked up at the jury, then at the gallery, where Amira sat with Lily quietly beside her. The child's small head rested against her mother's arm, eyes large and trusting. The judge cleared his throat. "Counselor Ferraro," he began, voice grave, "you argue that emotional testimony should be weighed alongside physical evidence in determining intent. However, the rules of evidence caution us against admitting retrospective accounts that cannot be corroborated in real time." As he paused, eyes drifting to the bench's carved emblem. "At the same time, justice requires that we consider the full context of a crime. Mocking laughter, though intangible, may reveal the assailant's mindset and cruelty." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Amira felt a surge of hope. The judge's voice had softened, the edge of dismissal dulled by introspection. Denise nodded respectfully, and the prosecutor shifted in his seat, brow furrowing as he prepared to counter. Judge Hargrave tapped his pen against the bench, the metronome of his deliberation echoing in the stillness. "I find this matter troubling," he continued. "The court must balance the potential prejudicial effect of emotional testimony against its probative value. Emotions can cloud judgment, yet they also capture crucial nuances of human behavior." Chibit, he looked down at his notes, then up at Denise and the prosecutor. "I will take this motion under advisement and issue a ruling at the close of evidence. In the meantime, I remind both parties that the standard is clear and convincing proof." Denise sat, her shoulders squared in quiet confidence. The prosecutor exhaled, relaxing his posture as though relieved that the judge had deferred a final decision. Amira exhaled as well, the knot in her chest loosening. The judge's uncertainty felt like an invitation to press on, to fill gaps with truth and testimony until doubt gave way to conviction. The clerk announced the next motion, but the atmosphere had shifted. Judge Hargrave's doubt was no longer a barrier, but a mirror reflecting the case's complexity. He listened intently as the prosecutor questioned procedural details, occasionally glancing at a mirror and then back at the counsel tables. Each pause carried weight, each question hinted at a judge searching for clarity amidst competing narratives. When the morning session ended, the gavel fell with a resonant thud. Amira gathered her papers, exchanging a meaningful look with Denise. Outside the courtroom, the hall buzzed with speculation. Some believed the judge's hesitation signaled impending skepticism. Others claimed it showed an open mind, ready to be convinced. Amira felt neither triumph nor despair. Instead, she felt resolve. Judge Hargrave's doubt had laid bare the challenge before her, to continue speaking until every shade of fear, every echo of laughter had been acknowledged and recorded. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Then she opened them and stepped into the hallway, prepared to meet the judge's uncertainty head-on with unwavering truth. Memories of her childhood home tugged at Amira Davis like an old photograph edged with dust. After the morning session, Denise Ferraro drove her to the old neighborhood where her mother had raised her and Lily before the attack tore their lives apart. The streets were lined with oak trees whose leaves shimmered in autumnal hues, and the brick row houses stood stoic under the low sun. Amira's heart thudded as they pulled up in front of the house where her past had been both sanctuary and shadow. Denise switched off the engine and turned to Amira. "You said you wanted to provide context for your past," she reminded her gently. "This is where it all began." Amira nodded, smoothing her jacket collar. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, her boots crunching fallen leaves. The front door was scuffed at the bottom, the paint chipped by years of weather and hurried arrivals. She swallowed, remembering her mother's embrace whenever she'd stumbled in from school, her laughter echoing down that hallway. Inside, the air was cool and still. Dust motes drifted in afternoon light that filtered through lace curtains. Amira ran her fingers over the banister, recalling how Lily once tumbled down those stairs in innocent play, and she had scooped her into trembling arms. She walked past the living room, where faded family photographs still clung to the walls, images of birthday cakes, backyard barbecues, and crisp Christmas mornings. On the mantel, a framed diploma bore her mother's name in flowing script, a reminder of dreams that had fueled their small lives. Denise followed quietly, watching Amira with compassionate eyes. "Your history here adds depth to your testimony," she said softly. "It shows who you were before grief and fear became part of your life." Amira nodded, moving into the kitchen where the linoleum floor was worn thin. The smell of old wood and faint traces of lingering dinners haunted the space. She opened a cabinet and found chipped mugs emblazoned with her childhood nickname, Miri. Her breath caught. She recalled how her mother had pressed a warm mug of cocoa into her hands after a school play, pride shining in her eyes. A sudden gust rattled the window, as though the past was stirring for acknowledgement. Amira drew in a steadying breath. She reached into her satchel and produced a folder containing her mother's death certificate, the police report from that final evening when a break-in turned violent. Denise watched as Amira spread the documents on the counter. The certificate listed her mother's name, cause of death, stab wounds, and the date. The police report described a botched robbery, an intruder's rage, and a daughter's desperate scream. Amira's voice trembled as she read aloud one line. Victim's daughter witnessed attack, sustained shock and trauma. She closed, her eyes, the memory of her mother's blood mingling with tears that had never fully dried. The laughter, she whispered, was the same. Denise placed a hand on her back. "You've carried more than most could bear," she said. "Revealing this shows the court the depth of your trauma." Amira nodded and laid out more evidence. Medical records documenting her own recovery from the assault on that terrifying night, therapy notes detailing Lily's nightmares, and letters from teachers noting Lily's withdrawn demeanor. Each document peeled back another layer of pain, unveiling roots that had spread into every corner of her life. Outside, the judge's clerk waited to collect the new filings. Denise tucked the documents into her briefcase. As they walked back to the car, Amira felt the weight of the past settle more firmly around her, but not as a shackle. Instead, it became a pedestal, solid ground from which she could stand unbowed. In the courtroom that afternoon, Denise presented the newly revealed history with measured clarity. She connected Amira's childhood trauma to her present-day resilience, illustrating how a lifetime of enduring loss had forged her courage. The judge and jury listened, their faces thoughtful, as the tapestry of Amira's life unfurled before them. When the session ended, Amira stepped outside into the crisp air, sunlight softened by gathering clouds. She looked back at the courthouse steps, feeling the past and present knit together. The unveiling of her history had not been a display of weakness, but a revelation of her unbreakable spirit, and as she watched leaves swirl in an autumn breeze, she knew that her truth, fully unveiled, would guide her path to justice. The courtroom settled into a hush as Lily Davis took her place on the witness stand, clutching the railing with small hands. Amira sat in the front row, heart pounding, and watched her daughter's dark eyes scan the room. Denise Ferraro offered a gentle nod from the counsel table, and Lily drew in a breath before glancing at her mother. When the clerk administered the oath, Lily straightened, chin lifting with sudden resolve. Her lips parted, and for a moment, the only sound was the soft rustle of her dress as she steadied herself. Judge Hargrave leaned forward, interest flickering. In his eyes, the prosecutor nodded politely, perhaps expecting a brief statement. Instead, Lily's voice emerged soft but unwavering. "Your Honor," she began, "I remember the laughter." Her words hung in the air, delicate as a bird's. First flutter. Amira felt tears sting her cheeks, but she held them back, knowing this was Lily's moment. The judge inclined his head, allowing the girl to continue. "I remember how it sounded cold and cruel," Lily said, voice steady. "He laughed as he pushed us to the ground. I felt scared. I thought he would come back and laugh again." She blinked once, holding the judge's gaze. "I want him to know that laughter hurts too." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the prosecutor's face softened, his next question swallowed by sympathy. Denise sat forward, pride shining in her eyes. Amira's chest swelled with love and awe. Lily Davis, at barely 8 years old, was pleading not just for herself, but for every child whose voice went unheard. Judge Hargrave tapped his pen against the bench, signaling for order. "Miss Davis," he said, "you are very brave to speak here today. Can you tell us how you felt when you heard that laughter?" Lily nodded, shoulders squared. "I felt small," she said. "Like I didn't matter. My mommy mattered, everyone mattered, but not me." Her gaze shifted to her mother, and Amira reached out, offering a reassuring squeeze. Lily turned back to the judge. "I want him to know that when he laughed, he took a piece of me." The gallery was silent. Supporters blinked back tears. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Judge Hargrave cleared his throat, eyes misting slightly. "Thank you, Miss Davis. You have shown us the power of words, and sometimes the power of pain." The prosecutor rose, but his voice was gentle. "Miss Davis, Did you tell Detective Liu about the laughter that night? Lily nodded. Yes. I told him I heard the mean laugh. She glanced at her mother. Because it was true. Denise stood to address the court, weaving Lily's testimony into the narrative of trauma and credibility. She cited child psychology experts, explaining that children often recall sensory details of frightening events with remarkable clarity. The judge listened intently, nodding at each point. When the session adjourned for recess, Amira embraced Lily outside the courtroom doors. Lily pressed a folded paper into her mother's hand, a drawing she had made. 2 figures, one large and dark, the other small and pale, surrounded by laughter lines turned jagged and red. It's so he remembers, Lily whispered. Amira kissed her daughter's forehead. He will, she promised. Back in the courtroom, the judge reviewed his notes, the corners of his mouth softened by reflection. The laughter that had once felt intangible was now crystallized by a child's plea, and it would echo in every deliberation that followed. Amira Davis sat quietly at the counsel table, gathering her notes, when the courtroom doors opened and a new presence entered. A hush rippled through the gallery as a tall man in plain clothes crossed to the witness stand. He looked unassuming, jeans and a worn leather jacket, but carried himself with a quiet authority. Judge Hargrave raised an eyebrow. "State your name and relation to this case," he invited. The man cleared his throat. "My name is Marcus Reed. I'm a security consultant and former military intelligence officer. I was hired by Miss Davis's family to review digital evidence and determine whether additional corroboration could be found for her testimony." A murmur ran through the spectators. Denise Ferraro stood, eyes bright. "Mr. Reed's report contains critical findings, Your Honor," she said. "I move to admit his testimony and the accompanying digital analysis." The prosecutor nodded, conceding the report's relevance, and Judge Hargrave granted the motion. Reed opened a sleek tablet connected to the courtroom monitors. The screen flickered to life, displaying a timeline of security camera footage from the block where the attack occurred. "Shortly after the assault, I conducted a frame-by-frame analysis of nearby cameras," he explained. "Here," he tapped an image frozen at night, "you can see the assailant walking away from Ms. Davis's home. Note the movement of his shoulders, consistent with someone laughing or smirking. We enhanced the audio track and isolated an audible clip." A soft whisper of astonishment spread through the room as Reed played a low, grainy audio snippet. From the speakers came a faint, sinister laugh, clear enough to send a shiver through every listener. Judge Hargrave leaned forward. Amira's throat tightened. She recognized that sound immediately. The same mocking tone that haunted her memories. "And Lily's testimony," Reed continued. "The laughter is preserved across 2 camera mics, confirming it was present at the time of the attack. We also matched the assailant's gait to footprints found near the scene." He displayed side by side overlays of surveillance frames and footprint impressions, their patterns aligning perfectly. The judge's eyes flicked between the screen and Amira. In that moment, her fight for recognition crystallized into undeniable proof. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted from debate to revelation. Denise rose to integrate Reed's findings into her closing, emphasizing how technology had validated Amira's emotional testimony. The prosecutor stood, brows furrowed but respectful. "While the evidence is compelling," he conceded, "we must ensure chain of custody and authenticity. I have no objection to its admission, provided the court is satisfied with authentication." Judge Hargrave nodded. "The court accepts the evidence as authenticated. It will be entered into the record." He gestured to Reed. "Mr. Reed, you may step down." As Reed returned to his seat, applause rippled through supporters. Amira pressed her hand to her heart, gratitude and relief mingling in her chest. Lily, seated beside Amira's sister in the front row, clapped softly, her eyes shining. When the judge called for closing arguments, Denise began with renewed vigor. She spoke of truth vindicated by science, of a mother's voice affirmed by technology, and of justice finally within reach. She reminded the jury that the mocking laughter, once a contested recollection, now echoed in digital clarity across two independent recordings. The jury members, faces solemn, nodded as one. Judge Hargrave's gaze softened as he prepared to guide the jury to instructions. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you have heard testimony supported by eyewitness accounts, expert analysis, and now digital confirmation. You will apply the law to these facts with fairness and integrity." His voice carried the weight of acknowledgement. Amira's truth, once shadowed by doubt, had been revealed in full clarity. As the jury was escorted from the courtroom, Amira felt a lightness settle over her shoulders. She glanced at Marcus Reed, offering a silent nod of thanks. In the wake of the hero's reveal, where technology exposed cruelty and validated courage, she understood that no amount of mockery or skepticism could diminish the power of truth once it was fully unveiled. A hush fell over the courtroom as jurors filed back in, their solemn expressions in stark contrast to the earlier tension. Amira Davis sat at the counsel table, clutching her mother's locket that hung around her neck. She exchanged a brief, reassuring nod with Denise Ferraro. Across the aisle, the prosecutor straightened his papers, preparing his final presentation. Judge Hargrave surveyed the room, his gavel poised to call order. When he did, the courtroom stilled instantly. Denise rose first to deliver her closing arguments. She spoke of Amira's courage, Lily's unwavering plea, and Marcus Reed's definitive audio evidence. Each point she made was met with gentle nods from jurors and soft gasps of affirmation from the gallery. Amira felt her heart swell with gratitude at the sound of these subtle acknowledgments. Denise paused before her final appeal. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice steady, "you have witnessed a mother's truth exposed in tears, in testimony, and in technology. You have seen how a simple, malicious laugh left indelible wounds on the hearts of a woman and her child. I ask you to honor that truth by delivering a verdict that acknowledges the reality of their pain." She sat, the room echoing with her words. The prosecutor stood, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "Members of the jury," he began, "you have heard powerful testimony and seen compelling evidence, but the law demands that we rely on facts, not emotion. We must consider whether every element of this case meets the legal standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt." His tone was respectful, yet firm. "You must weigh the recordings, the witness statements, and the corroborative details. Ask yourselves, has the defense met its burden? I submit that it has." As he concluded, the courtroom rippled with soft murmurs. Spectators exchanged glances, their whispered reactions carrying a mixture of relief and anticipation. Some pressed their fingertips to their lips, others leaned forward, eyes wide, as if afraid to miss the moment justice would be declared. Judge Hargrave rose slowly, his robe brushing the bench's edge. He looked toward the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will now retire to deliberate. Please select one juror to act as foreperson. You have heard the evidence, the testimony, and the arguments. I remind you to apply the law impartially, giving due weight to both emotional impact and factual certainty." He rapped the gavel, its staccato note releasing a collective breath. One by one, the jurors rose, filing out through the side door. The courtroom emptied gradually, leaving only a few relatives and reporters lingering. Amira watched the door close behind the last juror, her hand trembling around the locket. Denise placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, offering a small, supportive smile. Moments stretched into minutes. The press table buzzed with quiet speculation as reporters tapped queries into their tablets. The bailiffs shifted position, their eyes flicking between the council tables and the jury door. Every so often, a muffled word drifted from behind. The closed door, a sigh, the scrape of chair legs, the soft scritch of paper as jurors consulted their notes. Amira rose and walked toward the front row, where Lily sat clutching a small teddy bear. She knelt beside her daughter, smoothing Lily's hair. Lily's wide eyes were filled with hope and fear. "It's okay," Amira whispered. "We did everything we could." Lily nodded, leaning into her mother's embrace. Across the room, Denise paged through her notes, reviewing the key points one last time. The prosecutor adjusted his cufflinks, standing a respectful distance behind her. Judge Hargrave retreated behind the bench, reviewing legal texts and marking his schedule, yet his gaze often drifted toward the jury door, as though he, too, was awaiting the outcome. The stillness returned, a charged pause before resolution. In that space, Amira reflected on how far she had come, from tears at the bench to a mother's firm stand for her child. She thought of her daughter's plea, the stranger's unwavering gaze, and the echo of laughter rendered undeniable by technology. Each memory fortified her resolve. Suddenly, the jury door opened with soft hinges. A foreperson stepped forward, pale but determined, followed by the others. The spectators leaned in, and even the judge straightened in anticipation. The foreperson approached the bench, testimony in every measured step. "Your Honor," the juror began, voice clear, "we, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff." A collective exhale swept the room. Gasps of surprise and relief burst from the gallery, mingling with murmurs of approval. Amira pressed Lily closer, her tears finally spilling over in quiet gratitude. Denise let out a relieved sigh. Judge Hargrave nodded solemnly, his face betraying a hint of relief that justice had been served. As the verdict was read aloud, the courtroom transformed. What had been tension and doubt gave way to affirmation and support. In that chorus of gasps and murmurs, Amira sensed not only her personal victory, but a broader reckoning. A reminder that truth, once fully unveiled, could never be silenced again. The moment the jury's verdict was announced, the courtroom exhaled as one. Amira Davis sat with Lily clutched to her side, feeling the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. Behind her, spectators rose from their benches, offering nods and hushed congratulations. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Lang watched with quiet acknowledgement, but the most remarkable shift was in Judge Hargrave. His stern posture had eased, and something like respect glimmered in his eyes. Amira rose and approached. The bench, the wooden railing, felt warm beneath her fingertips, a testament to the countless cases it had supported. Judge Hargrave folded his hands atop the bench and regarded her solemnly. His voice, when he spoke, carried a tone of earnest recognition rather than detached authority. "Ms. Davis," he began, "today you demonstrated extraordinary fortitude. Your willingness to share painful memories, to bring evidence forward, and to stand before this court has changed the way we view such cases." He paused, as if measuring the full import of his words. "I apologize for any doubt I may have cast on your testimony. In this courtroom, respect must follow truth, not precede it." A murmur of approval rippled through the gallery. Amira felt her eyes sting, but blinked back tears. She nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied, voice steady. Behind her, Lily peered curiously from beneath her mother's arm, sensing the gravity of the exchange. The judge continued, addressing everyone present. "Let this proceeding serve as a reminder that justice is born when we listen without prejudice and examine evidence without bias. Mockery has no place in these halls, nor in our hearts, especially when confronted with genuine courage." He tapped his gavel lightly. "Court is adjourned." The sound echoed like a declaration of renewed purpose. After the gavel fell, the courtroom transformed from an arena of tension into a space of shared respect. A few spectators approached Amira to offer condolences and congratulations, their voices warm. Denise Ferraro embraced her client, whispering pride and relief. Prosecutor Lang approached next, extending his hand. "Ms. Davis, I owe you respect for your perseverance," he said. Amira shook his hand, finding sincerity in his eyes. In the back of the courtroom, the familiar empty seat where the stranger had once sat now bore a small bouquet of wildflowers. A note pinned to the stems read, "For unshakable truth." Amira recognized the handwriting, Lily's careful scrawl. She smiled, tears spilling freely now, and lifted Lily into her arms. "You did this, sweetheart," she told her daughter. Lily beamed, clutching her teddy bear. As the crowd began to disperse, Judge Hargrave remained seated for a moment, surveying the benches now dotted with gratitude and solidarity. He gathered his robe and stood, moving down from the bench to the council table. In a rare gesture, he offered Amira his hand, helping her descend the steps. Amira accepted, honoring the bridge between authority and empathy that had finally been built. Outside the courtroom, the corridor buzzed with quiet conversations. Staff members paused to shake Amira's hand. A long-time bailiff, his face usually impassive, saluted her respectfully. Amira straightened her shoulders, feeling the dignity that had eluded her all morning settle firmly within her. On her way out, Amira paused before the double doors. The carved wood bore the faint marks of history, decisions that had altered lives, some for better, others worse. Today, the doors had witnessed transformation. Mockery turned to respect, doubt turned to belief, and pain acknowledged as truth. She placed her hand on the cool surface, silently thanking the place that had tested her and ultimately recognized her. Lily tugged at her hand. "Mummy, can we get ice cream?" she asked, innocence lighting her face. Amira laughed softly, scooping Lily into her arms. "Yes, baby, let's celebrate." Together, they walked through the doors into the crisp afternoon light, leaving behind a courtroom forever changed by their courage and by the respect that had finally replaced mockery. Morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window. As Amira Davis sat at the table, Lily perched on her lap. The previous day's verdict was a bittersweet memory, justice delivered, but wounds still raw. Today, however, carried a different weight, the promise of relief. Amira cradled a mug of tea between her hands, feeling its warmth seep into her palms, anchoring her to the present. Lily pressed her face against Amira's cheek. "Mummy," she whispered, voice soft with wonder, "do we really have nothing more to worry about?" Amira stroked her daughter's hair, inhaling its familiar scent. "We've done everything we can, sweetheart," she murmured. "Today, we begin healing." Outside, sparrows flitted among the branches of the maple tree, their song bright against the hush of early morning. Amira watched them for a moment, thinking of how she and Lily had once huddled in terror inside their home, praying for safety. Now, she felt a calm she hadn't known in months. The laughter that once haunted her memories had been named, challenged, and finally acknowledged. She wandered into the living room, Lily still in her arms. The walls were adorned with photographs. Amira's mother beaming at her graduation, Lily's first steps captured in grainy snapshots, family gatherings before tragedy. Amira paused at the photo of her mother, touching the frame's cool glass. A soft ache pressed in her chest, bittersweet. With loss and gratitude, she whispered, "This one's for you, Mom." Lily reached out to the coffee table, picking up a small figurine, an angel that had once belonged to Amira's mother. She handed it to her mother with serious solemnity. Amira accepted it, recognizing in her daughter's gesture the strength they shared. She placed the angel back on the mantel, straightening it with care. Later, Denise Ferraro arrived with fresh flowers in a glass vase. "Congratulations," she said, voice lilting with relief. "You've earned more than just a favorable verdict." She set the vase on the dining table, scattering petals of lavender and white across the surface. Amira thanked her friend and attorney, offering warm hugs all around. With Denise's encouragement, Amira decided to reclaim part of her life that had been on hold. She changed out of the dark suit she'd worn to court into soft jeans and a light sweater. She brushed her hair until it caught the morning light, each strand reflecting possibility. Lily giggled as her mother spun in a circle, reminiscent of carefree dances from years gone by. They stepped outside, the crisp air greeting them like an old friend. Lily squealed, running toward the swing set in the yard. Amira pushed her gently, the motion simple and restorative. With each back and forth, she felt burdens lift, replaced by a gentle contentment. Neighbors passing by offered warm waves, their smiles genuine and filled with shared pride. Later, Amira led Lily to the community center where volunteers were preparing a small gathering. Cakes, coffee, and thank you cards. Friends and supporters filtered in, eager to celebrate a mother's courage. Each hug and heartfelt word reinforced the bond they shared. When Lily presented Amira with a hand-drawn card that simply read "Brave Mom," tears welled in Amira's eyes. But these were tears of joy. In the afternoon's glow, Amira walked home alone for a moment, breathing deeply. The sun's warmth felt forgiving, as though the world itself offered congratulations. She paused beneath a blooming jasmine vine, closing her eyes and pressing her palm against the bark. She whispered, "I'm okay now." Returning inside, she found Lily asleep on the couch, head cradled by a pillow embroidered with daisies. Amira draped a soft blanket over her and sat nearby, watching the gentle rise and fall of Lily's chest. She thought of the journey they had endured, from fear and mockery to acknowledgement and healing. In this quiet moment, she allowed herself to feel full relief. As evening settled, Amira prepared dinner, a simple pasta with fresh basil and tomatoes from the farmer's market. The aroma filled the kitchen, comforting as a lullaby. She set 2 bowls on the table and lit a single candle. When Lily awoke, she climbed into her chair and smiled. "I'm hungry," she said sleepily. Amira smiled back, gratitude radiating in her eyes. She ladled pasta into their bowls, feeling the symmetry of their shared plate, mother and daughter, safe at last. Tasting relief. In the flickering candlelight, Amira realized that true healing began not in a courtroom's verdict, but in these tender, ordinary moments of a mother's relief. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Hargrave stood, lifting his hand to address the packed chamber. Amira Davis sat at the counsel table, her hands folded in her lap, absorbing the gravity of each moment. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, breath caught, eyes fixed on the bench where the man whose mockery had once cut so deeply now wielded the gavel with solemn authority. Judge Hargrave cleared his throat, adjusting his robe with careful precision. Having considered all testimony, evidence, and arguments presented, he began, his voice resonating against the high ceilings, "This court recognizes the profound impact of the defendant's actions on the lives of the plaintiff and her child." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Amira felt her pulse quicken, every nerve attuned to his tone. "In cases such as these," the judge continued, "we must ensure that the scales of justice reflect not only legal statutes, but also the truths borne by those who stand before this bench." He glanced down at his notes, then upward to survey the courtroom. His eyes softened as they met Amira's, acknowledging her journey through vulnerability to vindication. Amira inhaled slowly, recalling the laughter that had once echoed unchallenged in her memory. She thought of Lily's plea, the pastor's counsel, Detective Lou's report, and Marcus Reed's digital reveal. Each piece had converged to form an unassailable mosaic of truth. She drew her shoulders back, confidence blossoming in her chest. Judge Hargrave shifted, picking up the gavel. "It is the determination of this court that the defendant is liable for the damages suffered by the plaintiff and her daughter," he pronounced. A murmur rippled through the gallery as spectators exchanged glances marked by relief and affirmation. Amira felt tears well behind her eyelids, but blinked them back, breathing in steadiness. The judge paused once more, his gaze sweeping across the counsel tables and jury box. "This court orders the defendant to provide appropriate restitution, including compensatory damages for emotional trauma and therapeutic support for the minor child involved. Additionally, the court directs the implementation of protective measures to ensure no further harm befalls the plaintiff." He tapped the gavel lightly against the bench, the first strike echoing with finality. Amira's heart leapt. Each tap of the gavel reverberated through her, a clarion call that her ordeal had culminated in a formal declaration of accountability. The murmur swelled into a gentle crescendo as the full implications of the ruling sank in. Denise Ferraro allowed herself a small, triumphant smile, discreetly touching Amira's arm in solidarity. Judge Hargrave gazed at Amira one last time before stepping down from the bench. "Court is adjourned," he declared. The gavel fell. A final time, its resonant echo seeming to shatter the lingering shadows of doubt that had once clung to the courtroom's corners. A collective exhalation swept the room. Spectators rose, applause rippling through the wooden benches as they acknowledged the significance of the moment. Some wiped tears from their eyes, others offered nods of respect that conveyed more meaning than words could capture. Amira stood, her legs steady beneath her, and returned the applause with a gentle nod. Lily, seated with her aunt in the front row, beamed, clapping with unbridled enthusiasm. The bond between mother and daughter shone in that shared celebration, a testament to their resilience. As the crowd dispersed, Judge Hargrave remained beside the bench, gathering his papers. He approached the counsel rail where Amira stood, extending his hand. "Ms. Davis," he said quietly, "you have my deepest respect." Amira accepted his handshake, her grip firm. In his eyes she saw genuine acknowledgement, an affirmation that her truth had not only been heard, but honored. Stepping out into the courthouse corridor, Amira breathed in fresh air that tasted sweeter than ever. Reporters hovered with microphones, but she spoke only to the press liaison, offering a prepared statement of gratitude. Lily waddled alongside her, clutching the edge of her mother's skirt, her wide eyes reflecting pride and wonder. Beyond the courthouse doors, sunlight bathed the steps in warmth. Amira paused at the threshold, looking back one last time. The gavel's fall had marked the end of her legal battle and the beginning of her new life, one where her daughter's safety and her own dignity were safeguarded by law and steeped in hard-won justice. With Lily by her side and relief swelling in her chest, she stepped fully into the light, leaving behind the echo of the gavel and carrying forward the promise of peace. The morning air was crisp when Amira Davis emerged from the courthouse, her daughter Lily clutching her hand. Reporters jostled for space on the steps, their cameras clicking, but Amira's gaze remained steady on the horizon. Behind her, those grand columns now stood as symbols of a system that had finally acknowledged her truth. She guided Lily down the marble steps, each footfall echoing resolve rather than fear. At the bottom, Denise Ferraro awaited with a warm smile and 2 takeaway coffees. She handed one to Amira, its lid crinkling softly. They shared a moment in companionable silence, sipping the hot brew as supporters approached, neighbors, activists, and clergy who had rallied behind Amira's cause. Each embraced her with gratitude, reminding her that justice extended beyond the courtroom's verdict. A procession formed, winding through the plaza toward the community center where Amira's case had become a rallying point. Grass lawns glistened with morning dew, and flower beds bloomed with late-season roses. Banners fluttered in the breeze, declaring justice rekindled and truth triumphs. Amira paused to admire a mural freshly painted on a nearby wall. Her own likeness, labeled courage, hands raised protectively around a small child. She ran a fingertip over vibrant strokes of color, feeling the heartbeat of collective remembrance. Inside the community center, a gathering convened, beneath high ceilings, festooned with twinkling lights. Tables were laden with pastries and fruit, and volunteers bustled about, setting out placards detailing ongoing support resources for survivors. At the front, a podium bore a simple plaque. "Today, we rekindle justice." Amira took her seat. In the front row, Lily nestled beside her. Pastor Caldwell stepped forward as moderator. He spoke of redemption and the power of community to transform pain into purpose. His words resonated, and attendees nodded in unison. Then Denise rose to recount the case's journey, the wounds inflicted, the courtroom mockery, the unwavering testimony, and the ultimate ruling that affirmed Amira's experience. Her narrative wove triumph with solemn recognition of the work that remained. Next came Lily, shy at first, but encouraged by her mother's squeeze. The little girl approached. The microphone, her teddy bear tucked under one arm. "My mommy is brave," she said, voice clear in the hushed room. "Because she told the truth. We're safe now." Applause erupted, tears glimmering in many eyes. Amira felt her heart swell with pride as Lily returned to her seat, perched on her lap like a living emblem of hope. Community leaders followed, unveiling initiatives born from Amira's case, a legal clinic for survivors, a counseling fund for children, and a scholarship in her mother's name for social justice students. Each program signaled that the verdict was not an endpoint, but a spark igniting broader change. Amira listened, her chest warming with purpose. When the formal presentations concluded, attendees mingled, sharing stories and forging connections. Amira moved through the crowd, offering quiet words of thanks and encouragement. She paused beside the mural outdoors, where a small plaque now read, "In gratitude to those who dared to speak, may justice never sleep." She touched the plaque, feeling a surge of connection to every survivor who had remained silent too long. As afternoon light softened, Amira gathered Lily in her arms and stepped outside. She inhaled deeply, the scent of roses mingling with fresh paint and possibility. Denise joined them, slipping her arms around both of them in a gentle embrace. "This is just the beginning," Denise said softly. Amira nodded, realizing that the rekindling of justice required persistence, community, and unwavering truth. Lily tugged at her mother's coat. "Can we go home now?" she asked. Amira smiled, lifting her onto her hip. "Yes, baby," she replied. Together they walked toward the car, each step a testament to justice rekindled and purpose renewed. In that moment, Amira understood that victory was not only measured by a gavel's fall, but by the enduring flame of change they now carried forward.